Hi, everyone. We're here with Marcus Aitken, the amazing, brilliant abstract artist from South London, who has run two studio sales with us now, one in 2023 this year and another one in 2022. And they were a huge success. And so we wanted to catch up. I wanted to catch up with Marcus just to find out what the formula is to having a successful studio sale auction, kind of approach to it, and get any advice and tips that we can share with anyone else wanting to run a studio sale. So, Marcus, thank you so much for letting us pester you with this interview, because I know you're extremely busy with so many shows and fairs going on at the moment. So, hugely appreciated. Thank you.
No problem. My pleasure.
Excellent. Well, let's jump straight in. So you've run two studio sale auctions now.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years. Why did you run the studio sale auction?
So I think I can't remember how the first one came about. I think Auction Collective were in touch with me about it. But yeah, it's something that I'd seen other artists do before, not through Auction Collective necessarily, but just kind of off their own bat. You know, it's, yeah, I don't know, you kind of come across these things. So I just thought, yeah, I've never done this before. Let's give it a go. Let's try it. And for me, it's an opportunity to, two reasons really. One would be to kind of make space in my studio. I don't have the biggest space. And secondly, it's also an opportunity to actually, hopefully, make some money towards my next series. So it's kind of a twofold thing, which I think is probably a common answer for most artists looking to do a studio sale.
Yeah, the amount of studio visits you go on, and you can't quite close the door behind you because it's got stacks full of artwork and like,
yeah.
And
depending on when you get me, my studio is very much like that. But yeah, actually, after the last studio sale, it was a nice empty studio, which is a rare occasion for me. So yeah,
good. Well, that's the outcome we want. And so, obviously, you've got your studio. How do you approach the studio sale? So you want to kind of put this in that really polite way, kind of clear out or move on those artworks. How do you approach selecting the artworks for the auction?
So the works that I chose, just going off the last one I did, were they're works that I've, for one reason or another, they've not sold in shows, or you know, online or wherever they might be. It's not to say they're rubbish works, because I'd never want to kind of put out any works that I'm not happy with and I'm not proud of. So I wouldn't advise that to other artists.
Yeah.
But they're works that for one reason or another, they just haven't sold. And I'm kind of in a position where I'm like, do you know what? I'm happy to let these go at a price that would be less than what I'd normally sell them for. And you know, some of the works in there actually I really like, and I was kind of a lot of umming and ahhing of like, do I include this or don't I? But I always, with this, I always kind of make sure that there are a few kind of at least 2 to 3 standout works I'm really kind of like, ooh, grappling onto, because I think there needs to be that to just draw the interest in.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too, because it's definitely not, you know, you're still selling your artwork, and there's the quality within that.
Yeah.
You know, we have had artists who get excited about a studio sale and then create artwork for the studio sale. So it's kind of twofold. It's one is moving on other pieces, the others is like, oh, I'm going to use this actually as a showcase.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think actually there's anything potentially wrong with that. I do think though it is good idea just to kind of like, when people think of a studio sale, you think of kind of pre-existing items. So yeah, for someone who knows your work and is going to be a buyer, they'll probably want to see a couple of pieces which they recognize.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, if you're going to go down that route of creating work for it, great, do that, but also potentially think about including a few kind of existing works.
The ones that got away, so you can show it back to the buyer and be like, you missed out on this. This is your last chance.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me as well, I had kind of a few messages after, or actually during, of people kind of saying, I remember when you posted this artwork on Instagram, and I'm really excited to get a bid on it. So that kind of link is a really nice thing to hear. And also it's kind of that whole thing of that it's not a new thing. So that it's kind of, that's already in their brain, and that's already an image that exists.
Yeah.
So it kind of becomes potentially a more attractive prospect for the buyer.
Yeah, and more familiar with it as well. And because it is still, like you say, they're not it's not rubbish artworks. They're artworks you're proud of.
Exactly.
And just
Yeah.
it's a fact of life. Sometimes things sell, sometimes things don't sell. And we were chatting earlier how a fair could have really bad results because there's been a snowstorm and people don't come in. Like, that doesn't mean anything bad about the artwork. It's just life. To be really kind of brutal about it, it's just commercial retail. At that point, some things sell, some things don't.
Yeah.
It just moves on. So with that, another kind of hearing you talk about your existing followers and buyers seeing these works again and then going, oh, do you know what, I'm now going to have a go at them. We found that some artists also who've grown so much they've sort of outpriced their followers. You know, the early followers that got in at the beginning and were buying their work, and then their prices have increased over time, so you're kind of losing those people. So a studio sale is quite good to drop the price and go, do you know what, here's a chance for you to get it.
Yeah, which for me I've definitely experienced, because one of the nice things that I've kind of noticed both times is nearly all of the buyers are quite young. Which typically my kind of like average buyer, I would say, is between the ages of sort of 27 to sort of late 30s, that kind of bracket anyway. But yeah, I've had quite a few young buyers who I'd say sort of like late 20s, early 30s, something like that, where they're kind of like using this studio sale as an opportunity for them to get their hands on their first original artwork.
Yeah,
which is always, as I'm sure any artist will say, is a really like nice feeling when someone's chosen you as that first original piece.
Yeah,
like, oh, that's like such a pat on the back.
We had someone an artist in the 2023 studio sales, and we called up with them to see how it went, and she said that there was a buyer who actually lives around the corner from them, completely new, total coincidence, they live close together, but she went and dropped off the artwork, and it was, we'll come on to the pricing in a minute, but because the pricing was really low, much lower than her normal sales, the buyer got it for a bit of a bargain. She took it around, and the buyer was just over the moon, was like, this is gonna be an heirloom, this is so exciting, it's my first original artwork. And for the artist, it was like, oh, I've kind of sold it a bit low. It's good to move it on and meet a new buyer, but then it was suddenly, oh wow, I've actually given someone an opportunity here who normally wouldn't be able to get that kind of experience or get that artwork. And talking about it as an heirloom, she was like, I thought I just sold it as a discount price. And so it was really lovely to see that kind of that relationship built and what you can achieve with that.
Yeah.
On that note, so pricing artwork for a studio sale is a bit different from a gallery price or kind of private sale price, because this is you're pricing things to sell. You want them to find a new home. What's your approach to pricing them?
So the approach, I've kind of used the same approach both times because it's worked really well. Both times, as you know, I sold out, which was like I didn't expect to do at all. And both times have been like, wow, amazing, what great result. So the approach that I've gone for was that I kind of use the estimate as using kind of looking at what the actual price would be of the artwork if I was selling it through a gallery, retail price, or someone contacting me personally. I'd put it sort of like not bang in the middle, I guess, towards the higher end of the estimate. So the highest end of the estimate would actually be a bit over what the actual value of the artwork is, but then the low estimate would be under. So it's not quite middle, but just a bit sort of towards the higher estimate. But then in terms of the starting price, I'd actually put this fairly low, which can be quite a scary thing, and it's one of those things where I take the bigger picture of what do I want to get. I want to get, hopefully I want to sell all of these works, right? And knowing that, yes, one, there's going to be a few artworks that will sell for a lot less than what I would normally sell them for, but also, which has always been a really nice surprise, there's always a few works in there which have actually sold for a lot more than what they're actually worth, you know, what my normal cost price would be. Which is actually the beauty of doing an auction, because I think that kind of like bidding game gets quite exciting for people, and actually they get carried away, they get fixated. I want this artwork and I'm going to get it. So if it goes up and up and up, doesn't really matter to them potentially. So it can work in both ways, but I take a view of it of what do I want to do as a whole, not potentially individual pieces.
Yeah, that's really good. That's the brilliant approach, and it's the fact that you've got the estimate there that shows the true value of the piece, but then starting price can be whatever you want and as low as possible, just to kind of guarantee that sale. And then also, does the fact, because we don't, on the Auction Collective, we don't publish any sale results, and that's for two reasons. One is to stop price fixing. We called up the Competitions Markets Authority and said, how do we stop price fixing? You know, artists pushing up their prices. And they said, don't publish results. And the second was that if something doesn't sell or sells well below the value of the artwork, it's not a huge stain on that artist's record, because sometimes things, as we said, sometimes things sell, something they don't. And does that help with pricing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every artist will relate to this, of kind of like the fear of people seeing that a certain size artwork has sold for well under what it would normally sell for. And that actually, I think, will probably get quite a few people worried to set a low price initially. It did for me. And then I kind of just took a view on, well, actually, having read that you wouldn't publish, and after the auction, those prices are gone. So yeah, it definitely takes the fear out of it, for sure. Yeah, and it for me, it's kind of like enabled me to kind of like set a really approachable starting point for people, where, you know, some artworks I've had as low as kind of a £50 start, which most people who are looking to buy an original artwork, I think, is definitely achievable. And they're kind of like, you know what, I'll put my oar in, I'll put 50 or 60 quid in and see what happens. And actually what tends to happen is those people will have that initial bid in, and they'll be like, okay, cool, let's see what happens. They'll get outbid, hopefully, I think, anyway. And then they will kind of like reassess it and think, actually, yeah, do you know what, now I've put my bid in, I do actually really want this work. I think a useful exercise, I was thinking about this the other day when you contacted me to ask me to do this, was thinking of it kind of like eBay, or almost vintage, something like that, of when you're, you know, buying a pair of trousers or whatever, you know, it might be online, thinking about the processes you go through as a buyer, and just kind of basically putting yourself on the other end and seeing what would I do? How would I perform in this way?
Yeah, and what you've touched on something there that's I'm a total like geek for all different auction theories, and one there's so many advantages having a low starting price, and actually we talked about them in the help center. We got a support center that goes through advice on pricing and estimates, and a couple of videos there that we can share. But there's something called the attachment theory, where, and I fall for this, and I'm an auctioneer, and you know, I've designed the software and I know how it works, but when I'm bidding on something at a local auction house like a chest of drawers, I'll still fall for it. It's, you start the bidding really low, I'll put a bid in, and then I'm like, cool, this is mine, I've got some attachment to it, I'm owning this, I'm going to work out where it's going to go in my house, and you feel so invested into it that when somebody sends an outbid notification, you're like, no, this is mine, and you keep clicking away until you go like double, triple the price. But if you had seen it advertised at that price originally, you would never have bid. I would have said that's too expensive. But because I had that chance to get in at the bottom, it's fascinating. There's, yeah. So pricing them, selecting the artwork, pricing the artwork, and then promoting them. Obviously, we promote from the Auction Collective. We've got our newsletter, socials, website. How do you promote the auction?
I guess the two main ways, which are probably the very obvious ways, is one through Instagram. I don't kind of like typically do this too early, really. I'm kind of like a week before it actually starts. I find Instagram is very, you know, people will see something and basically forget about it within a day, you know. The nice thing about Instagram now, which I've used, is you can add reminders to this. So if people are interested, they can click, if you add it, remind me when the studio sale is actually happening. So they automatically will get a little reminder when it's launched. So yeah, I did that kind of like a week before, just I think posting saying, look, I'm getting involved in Auction Collective. But also the way I've kind of done it is, yes, I'm doing the studio sale, but it's also an opportunity that I'm doing this alongside a bunch of other artists. So it's not just my work, you can see everybody else. And I think, yes, when you're posting about any of your work, initially, and of course, primarily, it is about you making sales for yourself, but also it's kind of like bringing awareness to the sale as a whole, because really everything, it's a group effort, I think. That everything you do and everything the other artists do, we are kind of like mass promoting it as one vehicle. So yeah, that's one way. And then the other way is like kind of my newsletter, which isn't actually a very big newsletter, because stupidly I actually didn't even get people to start signing up to my website until sort of like 2 years ago or something like that. So I came to it a bit late, actually. And I, you know, one of those things in life where you look back and you wish, I wish I'd done this sooner, because for me, the newsletter has been really powerful. But yeah, other ways of kind of, I've put it on LinkedIn. I made an Eventbrite page just as an event of like, this is a studio sale online, and saying it's me and all these other artists doing it. I think those are it. Yeah, I think that there might have been a couple of others. I can't think now. But yeah, I'm always interested in kind of other ways, other platforms of advertising it. So yeah, I mean, if anyone watching this sees or has any other ideas, do let me know.
Well, we do have a in one of our auction help center articles, we've got a bit on the free listing sites and paid listing sites, so you can promote art events and auctions. And Eventbrite, we've noticed, is really great, because if somebody goes to an event at the Tate or Royal Academy, they'll then get a nudge to say, we know you like art, you might be interested in this, and it's an online studio sale auction.
Okay,
so we've seen a lot of new buyers coming in through Eventbrite.
Wow.
And then LinkedIn's great, because so much of the art world focuses on Instagram, but they forget that a lot of other people don't use Instagram at all. So loads of our buyers don't use Instagram. So we use LinkedIn, and it's a, you know, it's the professional social media, so people browse it at work as well. So it's we get good traction there and good engagement.
Yeah, I always think that as well, because it's I think of LinkedIn, and I think most people do, it's very far removed from anything creative, right? But actually, when you think about it, the potential buyers on there, those are the kind of people you want to be targeting. And like you said, yeah, it's checked within work hours, which, let's be honest, people are always looking for an excuse for, so something like a studio sale is great.
And we used to end our online auctions, in the evening, because we thought people would be more engaged. But we actually found out that people are more engaged around lunchtime, because they're at their desks and like, I'm just going to go and bid in an auction whilst it's happening. And one quite interesting thing, seeing the promotion of your auction, I've got the data here, the stats from the auction. Can I share them just to have a look? So in this was the auction in January. So 100% sold, amazing. But what's really interesting is seeing the uptick of registrations towards the end, and then also the number of bids at the end. So when how many registrations? So 10 people registered on 20th of January, but then 7 bids were placed. But then the majority of the bids came in on the last day, which is incredibly nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But great to see. And so it's interesting how that promotion, and I think it's the same with, and then actually we'll just have a look. So, and that's bidders from across the world. So my point about bidding at lunchtime, obviously it's lunchtime in the UK, but bidders from all over the place. And that's the same with your other auction, the auction in 2022, kind of big uptick at the end, and then also the bids. And I think that's you mentioned the comms, starting a week before the auction goes live is a good thing, but also it could be, perhaps you don't want to give too much lead time, because then people might lose interest unless they get like the reminders. And looking at these stats, actually, how have you felt they've performed? Obviously 100% sold, which is great. Any surprises from the auction? What was kind of good things or bad things?
Yeah, I think like just kind of touching on what you just said there, like a lot of registrations and bids right towards the end. This second time doing it, I was kind of like feeling a bit nervous, because I was like, you kind of like have a little daily check-in of like, oh, how's the auction doing, and like fingers crossed, and then you're like, oh man, no changes. Okay. Obviously it's not got the traction, but I think everybody's quite wise to sort of have how bidding kind of works now, and there are a lot of waiters who are kind of literally waiting to the last point to get their roar in. For me, one of the surprises was, I guess, which kind of made me feel a bit nervous, was people kind of left a lot of their bids and registrations right to the end. Because the early kind of days where you're checking it, you're kind of thinking, what? Or there's only a few bids on like 3 or 4, 5 pieces or something like that. And they're all low. But I found there was a lot of action in the last half an hour of the bid. Actually, nearly all of the action was there. So, which is quite exciting to know that there was people who had it kind of like in their diaries. They knew when the end point of the auction was. And they wanted to kind of wait until that last moment where they could just throw in their bids to hopefully get a good price. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking but exciting, and kind of it was a surprise for me, because I didn't actually think so much of the action would happen at that point. So yeah,
it's interesting to see, but you kind of, the tell there is that you had lots of people register. It was like over 50 people register for 16 lots. So that
really?
Shows interest.
Yeah,
it shows they've got interest and they're really excited about the auction, but they haven't yet put their bids in. So you can export that, all the registered bidders, ping them an email to say, hey, auction closing today, last nudge, or auction closing in 2 days.
Yeah.
Whereas if there's, by having that, but if you didn't have any registered bidders, then that is a worry, because then you think, right, we need to get more people engaged, because one thing is the nerves of waiting for everything to kick off at the end. We did an auction recently of a customized F1 car.
I saw that come up, yeah.
Well, there was a bid on that of £100,000 for 3 weeks. Nothing. We're like, okay, it's a good sale. And then in the last 15 minutes, there was a flurry of bidding, and it went up to £220,000. And
that's amazing. Wow.
What? Yeah, but why do people leave this? Like, our life is constant, kind of on the edge of our seat nerves. But there were about 500 people registered for that, so we knew that there was going to be activity at the end. By looking at the data, if you don't have anyone registered to bid, the fear is that people then go, oh, it's all going to happen at the end, but actually they wait until the end and nothing happens because there's no one registered to bid. So it's kind of looking to see what happens. But with yours, you had what's that, almost 5-6 people per lot, which is brilliant. What would you do differently next time?
Yeah, good question. It's hard to say because it went well. Which, that sounds like I'm patting myself on the back.
Nailed it.
I think there was a few artworks which definitely, kind of going back to the price point, definitely sold for a lot less than I would have hoped for. And I was kind of like, ooh, gulp. That's a bit of a kick in the teeth. Which in hindsight, I thought actually maybe I should have set the start price higher on those particular items, because they still had lots of interest, but I think people were just going up in small increments from where it was started. But having said that, there were a few artworks which I was like, oh, this is great. It's achieved more than actually what it's worth.
Well, it's worth what people pay for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Achieve more than the standard gallery price.
Yes, exactly, Tom.
Just to reassure those buyers, it is very much worth what you paid for it.
Yeah. But having said that, there was for instance, I always kind of try to, most of the works in the studio sale are kind of smaller works. But both times I've thrown in a kind of like fairly sizable pieces. I had one by 1 meter, and then one which was like 150 centimeters by 120. So pretty big works actually, which I think for people, it's just to keep that interest of like, oh, it's not just all tiny small pieces. There's some variation in the size. So hopefully if someone has a kind of like an area in the house, there'll be something there for them. One of the feedback was, because I know Auction Collective add on a bit of time towards the end, which is good because people think it's ended and they're like, oh, I've got 2 minutes to make another thing. I think it went on for, I don't actually know how that works, if it's different for everyone depending on what's happening or how the time is added.
It's when a bid is placed in the last minute, the whole auction extends by 2 minutes. And that means that if somebody was bidding on lot 5 and they got outbid, they could then bid on anything else in the auction. They could go back and bid on lot 1 or 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Then a lot of online auctions do what's called cascade bidding, where lot 1 ends and then lot 2 ends and then lot 3. But by doing that, if you get outbid on lot 6, you can't go back and bid on lot 1 to 5 because they've already closed. So we do it so the whole auction gets extended. And we have seen people moving around the bids. It's like this bidding musical chairs where you're winning it, and then somebody who gets outbid on lot 10 comes back and bids on yours. You're like, oh damn, okay, what can I bid on? And I did have some negative feedback from a buyer once who was really upset about this kind of closing time. But we pointed out to the seller that the reason that they're upset is because they got outbid, which means you sold your artwork for a higher price, which is a good thing for you.
Yeah.
And I see that yours went on for 8 minutes this year, so 8 minutes worth of bidding extensions, which is good. The record we've had is 56 minutes.
You're joking.
No.
That would be, I think that would be probably quite infuriating if you're a buyer. Like, just let it end. It's kind of like,
but then it makes it as democratic as possible because it's giving the opportunity to anyone who wants to put the highest bid in. And so if you want to win it, just put in a really high max bid so that any other bids that go against yours won't get in there.
True. Yeah. No, it's interesting because I wasn't actually sure how that worked, because I had someone kind of message me after saying like, oh yeah, I had a bid, but then I thought I'd won it because I'd timed it and everything just right. But yeah, so I don't know though.
I think we need to do a bit more communicating around that. We've got we're going to be launching some banners that pop up at the top to say bidding extended so that everyone can see that much more clearly on the site.
That's great. Yeah, I think that would be a good addition actually. Yeah.
And what advice would you give to anyone else running a studio sale?
I guess kind of just like everything we've discussed then. But I think for me it's like don't view it too kind of preciously, and you'll choose, I think, naturally works that you are ready to let go of. And yeah, that I think it's just taking a view on it, that there will be works that will sell, hopefully, for under what you'd want for them, but with the view that hopefully there'll be other works that will be over what you expected to get for them. But yeah, I think for me, it's been really successful, and has been a really good opportunity, and especially with the timing of it, kind of, which I think is great, by the way, because typically for most artists, sort of January, February time is quite a dead month, and we're all kind of like feeling the pinch of it a bit. So yeah, it's a really good time and really good opportunity for you to, one, grow your collector list, but two, also hopefully get a bit of injection of cash into your studio, and kind of, for me, to be able to use that to make bigger works, which, you know, creating a new series is always really exciting. So to be able to have a bit of pressure taken off to make room as well to do this is like a double whammy. So yeah, I would highly recommend it.
Awesome. And this is not a paid promotion or anything like that.
No, it's not at all. But yeah, just kind of, as I was saying to you before, Tom, like I've worked with Auction Collective a few times, and I really like what you guys do. I think it's really fair. You work with lots of different interesting emerging artists, myself being one. And yeah, I think it's a great platform, and yeah, it's very kind of open. There's no kind of like hidden anything with it. So yeah.
Well, that's our aim, and that's really great to hear. That's our aim, is to give professional auction capability to everyone, and no hidden like costs or surprises, or buyers as well. And actually, that was one thing you just mentioned there, is we haven't touched on that much, is in the last auction, so you sold 16 pieces, but you had 50 plus bidders, so that's a lot of people that didn't end up buying anything. Have you had much success with, because those are your bidders, have you had much success with any additional sales with them afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, so people from the previous year, when was it? I can't remember. Was it last year or the year before?
There's one in 2022. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, must have been that one. Those people have, since kind of inquired as to kind of like, what available bigger works have you got? Because I have a small one of yours and I really like it. Because I think everybody knows, once someone has bought something, they're much more likely to then buy another piece from you. Unless it's like a huge piece that's like
I've got no space now. But that's really great to hear. And we don't we're what I see our role is to give you the auction capability, give you the auction advice, and add it as another kind of sales tool in your toolkit of sales and marketing promotion, but also send buyers and bidders your way. So with all those bidders, the ideal result is that you go on and make loads more sales with the buyers, but also hopefully the really hungry underbidders who were trying to buy something but couldn't and got outbid. And you go on to build those relationships. We don't get in the way of them at all. That's the kind of sending people your way. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, I've taken up way too much of your time already, but this has been brilliant. Really, really interesting to hear. Really great to hear your feedback and your advice as well. And so I look forward very much to the next studio sale.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah,
That's praise enough.
Forward to it as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Right, really, really appreciate it. And we'll speak soon.
Okay.
Nice
Thank
one.
you.